the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Gaby Anderson. Gaby, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. So my name is Gaby Anderson. I am a wife, mom, writer. I have worked in many different jobs in many different industries, I believe as a result of a degree in business, which lends itself to being sort of the organizational and administrative person in any different field. So you end up dropping into a lot of different fields, and a lot of those sort of transfer to my writing. So some of those fields are restaurant industry, the travel industry. I worked in private aviation as a flight coordinator. I have run a pharmaceutical instrumentation company. So a lot of what I've done and a lot of my life goes into my writing. South of Happily, my book, is sort of a product of who I am and who my family is. And that is a bunch of Hungarian immigrants who left Hungary, not me personally, obviously, but they left Hungary in 1956 during the Hungarian Revolution. And I feel like my writing and really who I am is really a product of their strength and their ability to go to a new country and make a life for themselves.
Well, so having a book is an exciting thing. Are there multiple layers in it? Is it really kind of a complex story?
I think it is. So, on some level, I wouldn't call it a coming of age story. I would call it sort of a coming of awareness story. And it's really written by someone and for people who sort of arrive in their life a little bit late. And by that, I mean you taking control of your life and taking responsibility and taking ownership maybe a little bit later in life than a lot of people do, just because of how things go at the beginning. So South of Happily has a lot of those layers. The first layer is just Katy Kiss, who is the main character, is getting a divorce from a really crappy husband. And that's sort of the train, that's sort of the vehicle that takes you from the beginning of the end of the story. And then there's another layer where Katy is having these relationships and learning about her family. She's learning about herself because she starts going to therapy. And it's just like how those things sort of unwind. And I try to make it, in a way, I try to make it very realistic. And I also added the therapy because I currently work in behavioral health. My husband is a therapist. My older daughter is a therapist. So it was very important for me to write good therapy, and also often to have my husband read the parts where Katy goes to therapy and say, okay, am I in the lines? I want it to be in the lines. I want it to be maybe a little bit outside the lines, but I didn't want to stop anybody, especially if they were in behavioral health, to say, oh God, that would never happen. So that was important for me to stay that way. And also to show that, therapy can be good and funny and helpful. And then there's this other layer of the book where Katy is just really, really weird. She is just a weird, weird young woman. And I sort of like that the way that I put it is that I just sort of cracked her head open and there's a very big goopy mess inside. And that really kind of comes out, and it feels like that's what a lot of people relate to, that she's just so strange and she lets you know how strange she is, and everything that she questions turns out that it's what everybody else is always questioning as well. Just her overall, I guess I would call it bewilderment with life, and saying she is always bewildered. Like, how do I keep getting this wrong? And how come I still don't understand how this works? And sort of her journey of beginning to learn that, because this book, the first book, stretches for 6 weeks, and people don't get fixed in 6 weeks. So it's her journey, and the second book will continue with that.
I love quirky characters. How did you develop the character profile that you have so that you can stay consistent?
Well, that was easy because the story is sort of about what happened in my life. So the story I started writing about, I feel now it's been about over 20 years. I started writing it because I wanted to write. Actually, the way that it started is a little bit weird. It's like back in I think the sort of in the mid 90s when emails started. I started emailing everybody because I love typing and I type really fast. And I started emailing everybody. And some people would write back and they'd be like, "Hey, Gabby, you're really weird, so don't write to me anymore." But then a lot of people would write to me and say, "Hey, Gabby, you're really weird. This is really funny. You should write." And it sort of gave me the idea that, okay, so I started writing and I had sort of an idea that I wanted to write what I am, sort of. So the character Katy is me, but also mixed because she's 26 in the book. So very much mixed with my kids who are exactly that age. So it was not hard to develop this character. She's floating around in my brain.
Are you able to take liberties with her and make her more than what you were yourself?
Yes, though sometimes I wonder if I really need to, honestly. I'm not sure how many liberties I'm actually taking. Yeah, she's real weird. She's real weird. And in some ways maybe she's more normal. I made her look very different than me, and for me that was kind of fun because I've always kind of been the way that I am, and so it was fun to make her look very different than me and to sort of get into the mindset of somebody who is like her. She's like very, very thin and she's very flat, and I'm not. So it was really fun to write from that perspective.
I think that is fun. I mean, when you can, I like the expression crack open a character and then embody them as a writer, because that's really what we do is we get to invent people, and whether or not they're that far of a stretch from who we are or who we know doesn't really matter because we control them.
Right, exactly. But then then you get to a point where they're starting to control us. And what's funny is that my husband said just, I don't know, a couple months ago, he was like, we were talking about how much Katy changes from the beginning of the book, because he read the book to me when I was still in the editing phase with the publisher. I made him read the book out loud to me. And it was the first time that he had actually read all the way through. He'd read a bunch of little bits and pieces. And he said, it was interesting to see how much Katy changed. But then he kind of looked at me and he said, how much have you changed? And how much have both of you evolved during this time? And that part was almost more interesting. Like, what have I learned from Katy? And that part's been really, really interesting.
Well, the journey of self-discovery, I like your expression, coming of awareness. So coming of awareness for both the author and the character. It's fun how both you and your main character had coming of awareness scenarios.
Right. That's what made it so easy to write, at least the first book, because I do feel like that. I feel like everybody sort of arrives, when you get to this point and you remember thinking, I mean, for me, unfortunately, I think I was probably too old, where you start being self-aware and start, thinking about the consequences and thinking about why you are how you are. And I think people arrive at different times to that place of awareness. Everybody's different. And Katy is definitely coming to it a little bit late. And part of that is because of how her parents have treated her. And part of that is, I don't know if it's typical among other immigrants, but with for us, the Hungarian immigrants and Jewish immigrants, there's a lot of not talking about your past, not talking about what the family went through. And so the kids end up being very, very sheltered. And Katy knows zero about her past. And she even says at one point, I feel like I've been bubble wrapped my entire life, because that's how she grew up. So she doesn't know anything. And when you don't know anything, you don't really know what to look out for either. And so she kind of bounces around in her life, you know, screwing things up because she doesn't know.
Well, it sounds like it was a fun and rewarding book to write.
Yes.
Were you able to embrace a critique group or a writing group?
Yes, I've been a part of the Atlanta Writing Club since 2011. I've been in a critique group since 2011, and that has been, I would say, extremely instrumental in being able to, you know, get this book published. So when I first took it, I had the whole thing written out, and I went to the first meeting, and I was very nervous because I had never read my stuff to anybody, had never read it out loud, didn't have any idea if I wrote well or if I didn't write well. And I remember going to the first meeting and being super, super nervous. And I said to everybody, okay, like, tell me if this sucks because I've got a day job. And if it sucks, that's okay. Tell me and I will, you know, run away and do my day job and never do this again. And I read my 5 pages and they were all like, no, you got to keep writing. So it was good. And just even over the last, I think 10 years, 10, 11 years, it's been, I would say anybody, if you're not in a critique group and you write, you need to be in one, because what you think you're writing is a lot of it you're filling in your head, right? You know your character, you know what's supposed to happen, but the reader doesn't have all of that. Those blanks are not filled in for them. And a lot of what a critique group can do is say, I don't have any idea where you're coming from, or I don't understand why this happened or why that happened. So it's more than somebody saying, you know, you missed a period here or you missed a comma there. It's that input that you need from your potential readers, and it's absolutely invaluable.
Feedback is invaluable, particularly when it's on point.
Absolutely. And you have to listen. Sometimes it's not. I remember a couple times when somebody would say something to me, and, you know, we have our 5 pages and everybody writes it down, and then everybody, you know, has their copy, and then you get your all, you know, 20 or 10 pages, you know, 10 of your 5 pages back. And every once in a while somebody would say something, and then I'd get them all back, and there'd be a note on it saying, don't listen to what that person said, you know? So you learn, you know, you learn. You also learn how to critique other people's writing, and you learn how to write better. It's a huge help. I can't imagine what this book would look like without the critique book, without the critique group. It would be completely different and definitely not as good.
So the publishing journey, what has been the most surprising part for you?
That's been actually really fun. One part that's really hard that I didn't even think of before is getting reviews. I had no idea it was so hard to get reviews, though today I officially have 59 and I'm very excited. I just got a 5-star review, so I was very happy about that. So getting reviews, and I never even thought about it before. You know, if you're just out there in the world and you don't write and you don't do stuff like that and you don't publish things, it doesn't often occur to you that, you know, that a writer lives and dies sort of by their reviews. And so, you know, at the beginning, especially, I was very nervous about it, and now I've calmed down about it. But getting reviews has been very interesting. I know a lot of people talk about that they publish a book and then they want to keep going back and changing it. I don't have that feeling. I'm pretty okay with it. Because I'm working on the second one, so I feel okay with that. And then the other part that I'm really, really enjoying is going to book clubs. That is probably my favorite part out of anything, because of the feedback that I get and the people who are telling me things about my book that I didn't know about my book, because they're getting something different from it. And that's been really cool. I had a woman who was probably it was a group of older women, and I would say she was in her 80s. And she said, your book made me think about my relationship with men in a completely different way than I ever have before. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool at 80 years old to say that, and to be able to say that, and to even think that. So that's definitely been my favorite part. It's been, I just love the feedback, whether it's good or bad, and mostly it's good. I've had a couple of people say, you know, you said this sentence weird. I've had a couple of that where they say your sentence structure is a little bit weird. And then I have to say, my first language was Hungarian. And so I still say sentences a little bit weird. Like I will say, and I can never say it right, rhinoceros. And I know that's not how you say that word, but that's how I grew up, with everybody saying, with a like hard rolling R, rhinoceros. So I don't know. So I've had a couple of that where when I just have to just apologize and say, okay, I'm sorry about my sentence structure. And also there's a lot of cussing in the book, and I'm sort of sorry about that, and I actually wrote a newsletter about that. But I'm a pretty nice person, and I cuss a lot, and that's just where that is.
Well, you also have a podcast, and I have had the opportunity to join you on that. Tell me what's new with the podcast.
The podcast is going great. We've had so many cool people, including you, on it. We learned so much from all of you. We usually do 2 podcasts a month. We do some Zoom, some we do in person. We like the ones that we do in person because, we all get together and it's sort of a different chemistry, because also we have alcohol there. And so that always changes, the chemistry a little bit. But it's been really fun, and it's been really interesting learning everybody's story. And also, the podcast, The Wild Women, this is about women supporting women writing. And that part has been really cool. And now within sort of the Atlanta writing community, especially in the Atlanta Writing Club, we have sort of some cachet, because people will come up to us that we don't even know and say, "Are you a wild woman?" And then we all start laughing, and we're like, "When did that happen?" But yes, we are, So it's really cool. It's a fun podcast for sure.
It's called The Wild Women Who Write podcast.
Wild Women Who Write Take Flight. And it's on Spotify. It's on Anchor. I'm not sure where else it is. It's pretty fun. And you can see, everybody's different. We've had Kimberly Bell come on. We've had Kimberly Brock come on. We've had Emily Carpenter. We've had some really amazing people just be very gracious and come on. And I loved yours too. And I still remember the story that you were telling about the ghostwriting that you were doing. That was super interesting. I still remember that story. So it's just learning. It's just always learning something new. And you can never really know enough, I think.
Well, I would agree with you. Absolutely. Gaby Anderson, how can people learn more about you and your books and your podcast?
So the podcast is The Wild Women Who Write Take Flight. You can learn about me at my website, which is www.anderson-author.com. I'm on Amazon and Kindle, and they just turned South of Happily into an Audible book, which has been very interesting and weird. And I cried when I heard it the first time, because it was just so weird to hear somebody else say my words. So you can find me there. I'm on Goodreads. I'm on BookBub. I'm on all the usual places. And I'm sort of starting to leak out things about the sequel to South of Happily. And that, I think the working title so far is Dream a Little Dream. So I'm excited about that one. More of Katy and her weird crew.
Gaby, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Do you have any pets?
I do. I have right now we've got 3 dogs in the house and 2 cats. We have a little problem with, adopting from animal shelters. We have a little problem saying no. So we have a lot of animals, and we love them.
Well, animals definitely brighten up the day. Speaking of day, what is your favorite time of day?
That's interesting. If I'm willing to wake up really early in the morning, then I like it really, really early in the morning. That's probably my favorite time, even though I'm pretty lazy in the morning. I have a hard time getting up, but that's my favorite because it feels different. It feels new, which it is.
And besides the characters that you put on paper, have you ever had an imaginary friend?
I don't think I have. I know a lot of people have, but I don't think I have. I have like a movie playing in my head all the time. I always have like scenes playing in my head. I don't know if that's a writer thing or a creative thing, but I'm always sort of having a play or a movie going in my head. But no, I've never had an imaginary friend. As far as I know, you'd have to ask my mom. Maybe she knows something that she didn't tell me.
Well, when my youngest child was about 2, he had an imaginary mommy with blue hair, and he always wanted to go visit her.
Well, that's interesting. And what do they say about that now? I mean, do they like where that came from?
He doesn't remember. But he'd always say, "No, I want to go see my other mommy with the blue hair."
Wow, that's interesting.
And we didn't know anyone that had blue hair, so it was very interesting. Well, Gaby Anderson, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Boo! We're all done.
Yay! That was fun.
Gaby Anderson is a first-generation Hungarian-Canadian born in Montreal, Quebec. When she was a year old, her family moved to New Jersey, then Paris, back to Canada, and finally to the U.S., where she has lived ever since. She's married to one of her best friends from college, has 2 amazing daughters, and many, many animals from local shelters. Gaby has worked in the restaurant industry, commercial and travel industry, private aviation as a flight coordinator, and pharmaceutical instrumentation. She currently works in behavioral health management. South of Happily is her debut novel, published in January of 2023. She's hoping to have the sequel, Dream a Little Dream, published in late 2024 or early 2025. For more information about Gaby, visit her at anderson-author.com. And for more information on the wild women who write, take flight, find them wherever you find podcasts. For more information on the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. Until next time.